Take the Leap is the podcast where we get real about the roller coaster that is entrepreneurship and life. Sure, some folks make running a business look like a walk in the park, but let's be honest, it's more like a wild ride through a theme park with a lot of unexpected twists and turns.
Join us, your co-hosts, Ashlan
and Tory,
as we spill the beans on our own real-life experiences and shine a spotlight on some amazing guests. From the highs of success stories to the lows of epic failures. And hey, we'll even throw in some cringe-worthy, laugh-out-loud, embarrassing moments for good measure.
So buckle up and tune in every Tuesday and Thursday for a dose of raw, unfiltered truth about what it's really like to chase your dreams and build a business.
Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just dipping your toes into the startup world, we've got something for everyone. Even if it's just to make you think, wow, I'm glad I didn't do what they did.
All right, welcome back to the Take the Leap podcast. We are so excited to have our guest, Nel Taylor, here today. Nel is a member of the Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservation and is a nonprofit development, equity, HR, and fundraising strategy consultant with over 10 years of nonprofit experience, and is now the founder and steward of Now This Consulting, where they help organizations operationalize anti-racist principles into their HR, leadership, and fundraising policies and practices. Their introduction to nonprofit work came out of their transition from houselessness when they were 18 years old, advocating as a program participant in fundraising efforts. After experiencing exploitation at the hands of the nonprofit industrial complex, they set out to shift traditional harmful practices in fundraising and later the internal systems that perpetuate harm throughout the nonprofit sector. Still in their first year of business, they have consulted with Portland Parks Foundation, Farmers Market Fund, 350PDX, and sex worker affirming advocates. They previously served as interim co-executive director at Partners for a Hunger-Free Oregon, as well as the individual and corporate giving lead. Served as board chair at the Circus Project, and graduated from the Art of Leadership program through Regional Arts and Culture Council, the Certificate in Nonprofit Fundraising course at Willamette Valley Development Officers, and the Certificate of Managerial Resilience course at the People's Nonprofit Accelerator, where they also serve on the board of directors. Their firsthand experience working within non-hierarchical organizational structures, co-leadership models, and shared power systems, as well as being an impacted community member with lived experience of relying on the support of nonprofits, uniquely position them to guide organizational leaders through the reckoning required for systems change. Welcome, Nel. I feel like you've lived like many lifetimes through your work, and I'm super excited to have you share your story with our audience today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Listening to that, I know I sent you a new bio this morning, and listening to it back, I was like, okay, this is like a lot. It's nice to be reminded how much I've done.
A lot.
It is absolutely a lot. And we met, so obviously you and Ashlan have known each other longer, but we met because you took the very first baby version of our Take the Leap course.
I did.
When we were doing it live weekly for, I don't know, it was 6 weeks, right? Yeah. And oh my gosh, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, look how far we've all come from that moment. And I'm so excited about your guys' podcast, taking that experience of helping people move into creating their own businesses and really broadcasting that out there for other people to learn from. I think it's great.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being here. And we always like to start off our interviews by asking the same question. And that is, what is your Take the Leap story?
Yeah. Can I say I kind of started my business out of spite?
That's totally fair. Yeah.
So I have been in nonprofits for 10 years, maybe coming up on 12 now, and started in fundraising because I saw that was a way that I could have like a larger impact, right? I originally thought I was going to be a social worker, and I was like, I can have a caseload of 10 people, or I can help nonprofits who are helping hundreds of people and have that larger impact. And through my experience in the nonprofit sector, I started to learn about problematic systems and toxic work environments and the ways that white supremacy culture shows up in our spaces. And we all live under the thumb of white supremacy culture and the patriarchy. And so I became the person at every nonprofit that would raise my hand and be like, I think this might be racist. Maybe we should rethink this. And you don't always make friends doing that. And so the last place that I worked, I'm not going to say who they are. They're doing amazing work, and other people are having a better experience than I was. But I was that person, like kind of rocking the boat. And I started to feel really alienated. And the organization wasn't doing the work that I wanted to see it do. And there's this, definitely look it up. There's a graphic that you can look up on Google. It's the life cycle of a woman of color in nonprofits. And I am not a woman, but I identify with a lot of those experiences. And it's an organization will be so excited that you come on and that you have all these radical ideas, and then there starts to build some resentment, and then you start to feel pushed out of an organization, and then people of color leave first. And that was kind of my experience. And so out of that, and kind of being fed up with not feeling supported and not feeling welcome on a team, I was like, maybe I should just do this on my own. And it's funny because, 2 years ago or so, my brilliant friend and colleague, Ashlan, reached out to me and had the course that you guys were doing. And at the time, I wasn't even really thinking of starting a business. It wasn't really on my radar. And going through the course and realizing that I could take things into my own hands later, about a year later, when things were starting to get really bad at my last job, I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this. And I read a lot of books about entrepreneurship, and then took the leap July of last year. So I'm still in my first year of business, and it's going very well. And now, everyone that I collaborate with wants me there. They hired me specifically for what I bring to the table, especially my expertise in radical thinking and centering liberation and justice. And so now every time I meet with a client, every time I'm working on a project, I feel wanted. And people, are like, I'm booked out. Like, people do see my value. And definitely more so than when I was at previous jobs that I've had. So yeah, that's what brought me here, and things are going pretty well so far.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
I am just so proud of you. And I do remember those conversations where you were like, I don't know. And I'm like, just sit through it, come, give us feedback. And I remember, because the way we advertised it, we were like, launch your business in 6 weeks. And I remember you told us this very valuable feedback. You're like, this is a lot. This is not
you can't do this in 6 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, both of us did not do this in 6 weeks,
No.
but I really appreciate that feedback. And, we're so excited. I think in the next couple of weeks, we'll be launching the course officially out there into the world with a lot of that feedback, but baked in that you shared. But yeah, I mean, both of us, being that we work directly with clients, feel you in that. And both of us having worked for nonprofits, I'll bring things to a client that they're like, wow, where did you come up with this idea? And I'm like, I've been sitting on it for 5 years. I've had multiple organizations that I wanted to do this in, and they were like, no, for whatever reason. So it's really been, nice for both of us. And I know for you, Nel, to be on the other side of it, where oh, you're hired to do something, and you get to follow through on that something with folks as well.
Right. Well, and when I start working with a nonprofit too, like I find the person that was me. I find the person on the team who's raising their hand, who's not being heard, who has really radical ideas. And I want to help give them a voice. Because there were so many times that like I would say the thing over and over and not be heard. And then a nonprofit would pay a consultant tens of thousands of dollars to come and say the same thing. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to be that guy and get paid like that. But yeah, like every time I work with a client, I find that person. I find the boat rocker, the rabble rouser, the person making good trouble, and collaborate with them on solutions because I don't want them to feel like they were just ignored and I'm coming in with like all brand new ideas without hearing them.
Absolutely.
I love that. That's so great.
And it's such a common trend at nonprofits specifically. I don't know why, but yeah, I feel like we've all kind of had similar stories like that where we're not listened to, but then a consultant comes in. So why not just be the consultant?
Right. Exactly.
I also loved your answer. I started my business out of spite. That is my new favorite answer. And I think we should like make that a sticker.
My partner told me not to say that this morning.
I love it.
I mean, it's very real, and it is a lot of times why people choose to go out on their own, because I do think a lot of people, you know, who are thinking about entrepreneurship, they're like, oh, it's big, it's scary, it's all these things, but it's like you could be so much happier on the other side. You could not, you know, like I actually just came back from a podcast conference where I did a mini recording like at the conference, and it was all about what was the powerful moment of you hearing no and turning it into yeses. And you know, it was after many years of hearing no internally on teams that I was just like, why would you want to deal, you know, with all of that rejection of your ideas and your creativity, you know, turning to starting your own business? Then you get to choose who you work with. You get to get those yeses. And, you know, I'll be totally honest, it's a little bit of the dopamine hit of like, you know, that people pleasing, like, yeah, we did it. But it's an important aspect of feeling valued and feeling listened to as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I know that you just started in July, but let's not discount that at all. What piece of advice would you give yourself now, like when you started, knowing what you do now in your business?
Yeah, when it comes to like the work I'm doing now and what I've been learning, I would definitely tell myself, even I would tell 3 months ago me, that when you're scoping a project, however long you think it's going to take, double it. Because I keep having to extend and rescope, and I'm just learning like things take the time they take. But in terms of like when I was getting started, I asked that question to all of the entrepreneurs I know. I met with as many people as I could, and I got a lot of great advice that honestly, like, I feel like I made some really solid choices, and I don't think I would go back and do anything differently. I got a business coach, which I highly recommend. I took your guys' class. I got a business coach. I made all the steps of building the business and launching before, putting the cart before the horse, before getting, having too many clients and then not having the LLC set up, which can, then you're doing forensic accounting and having to go backwards. And so I feel like I did do things in the order that I would want to do them again, and that I would advise other people to do them. And yeah, like if I can go back to myself, a year before I started, or if I could give advice to anyone else, it would be get a business coach, get a coach to walk you through this. And like the money is there. If you're ready to start a business, you can do it. It was like $800 for my coach. And it was a game changer.
That's so incredible. I feel
That's great.
Oh, sorry, Ashlan.
Go ahead, Tori. No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think that's so incredible because so many people don't start from that point. They just kind of leap. before really fully hashing it out. And though I understand that sometimes you just have to take action and sometimes you just have to move forward. I've learned that the more strategy, the more thought, the more plans, even though they're going to completely change probably from where you started, the more that you can set yourself up that way, the more successful typically you're going to be, or at least the faster you are going to figure out your goals. So that's incredible. I'm so glad that you had that experience and that you were able to get a coach so soon and get that done. I'm so happy for you. Like this is just so exciting.
I guess for me, maybe it wasn't so much of a leap as it was like a cautious walk forward in a very like specific direction, because I am a very like type A organized person. And yeah, I need to like know where the next step is, but definitely quitting my job was a big leap. I had nothing planned. And I guess like, yeah, I would probably tell myself too, like, it's going to be fine. The money will come, the clients will come. And people want to work with you. People know like what you're capable of, and just like put yourself out there and they'll come.
Absolutely. Yes, that's amazing. That's awesome. Well, my next question for you is, what is your why? Why are you doing this?
Yeah. So why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, like you guys said in my bio, I'm helping nonprofits. My motto is I'm just out here trying to indigenize the nonprofit sector. And, you know, my ultimate why is I want to have the biggest footprint I have, the biggest impact I can have. And so when I'm helping multiple organizations who are helping hundreds of people, that like combined impact makes a huge difference. And, you know, the nonprofit sector has done a lot of work in, you know, starting with like a lot of DEI work and some anti-racism work. And then more recently, there's been a lot of like decolonizing has been a really like hot button issue. And their like Decolonizing Wealth project is doing amazing work. And I think that I'm ready to move organizations beyond decolonizing, beyond deconstructing systems, and into creating new systems and indigenizing systems. So imparting indigenous wisdom into how we're building our systems. And, you know, systemic problems like racism in the workplace, microaggressions, white supremacy culture, false urgency, those kinds of systemic problems need systemic solutions. So I don't work on an individual like relationship level. I'm not doing racial sensitivity training. I'm creating and disrupting and creating systems that get at the root causes of how these problems show up in nonprofits. And yeah, my hope, my ultimate why is to have that ripple effect, you know, to be able to impact, shift the way the whole sector is moving and impact multiple nonprofits who are impacting hundreds of people.
That's very incredible and like vulnerable work. And thank you for being at the forefront of it, because I have been in so many different organizations that say they want to do this and they do very surface level things like we did a DEI audit and that's it, you know, and we did it, we shelved it, we never have to do anything again. And I think the fact that you're addressing this at such a systems level, like in an organizational system level, it helps create more long-term impact, because regardless of who is coming in and out of organizations, because we know people don't work at the same nonprofit forever, people move around, it's going to have just that larger impact because you're embedding it into how the organization operates, as opposed to meeting with this set of leaders or meeting with, you know, the individuals who are doing direct service. So that's really wonderful that you're spearheading that work.
Right. Well, in nonprofits or organizations in general, any kind of organization has its own identity has its own personality, has its own life cycle, and has its own DNA. And you're right that like when we're shifting the identity of an organization, when we're shifting the culture that's embedded into the DNA of the organization, that you can have a whole new group of people. And we all know, like, turnover in nonprofits, especially in fundraising positions, you can have a completely new group of people who are still benefiting from the shifts that you've made in the identity of that organization. And we can't do equitable work externally. Like, I feel like there's a lot of focus on when we are doing, equity evaluations, when we're doing DEI trainings, there's focus on like racial sensitivity in how we're operating with the public, how we're doing our external programs, and how we're interacting with the communities that we're serving. But I don't think that we can wholly embody anti-racism in our external work with the communities if we're not also practicing it internally. And I think that when you are practicing that internally, that lives into how we're interacting with the community and builds community trust. But again, like just getting at those systems, getting at the root of how these things show up. And that means I live a lot in like HR, which I'm becoming a total nerd for HR, like administrative systems, like organizational, like leadership systems. And especially in fundraising, because we know that there can be like such a problematic relationship in philanthropy. And if we're shifting the way we as an organization are approaching our fundraising, especially how we're approaching relationships with funders, that's ultimately going to shift that system as well, which needs a lot of shifting.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And as somebody who was in the fundraising world as well, I read your blog post on fundraising and doing it in a more ethical way. And I'm looking back on some of the narratives that we would write and do for our videos, for galas, for fundraising pitches. And I'm like, yes, this needs to change. Absolutely. Because it feels more like exploiting in some cases. And I also loved what you had said about fundraising and people asking for money is really asking to redistribute wealth. And I just think it's so important what you're doing in the nonprofit space specifically, because the nonprofits are there to help people, and we need to do that. We need to actually help people in the right way, in the ethical way. And what you're doing is so powerful, and thank you for doing it. It needs that space needs it the most right now.
Thank you. That's so sweet. Well, and like, thank you for bringing up, the article I wrote for CCF. I was that person. I was I worked with a nonprofit who helped me get off the streets. And, I was living outside for 4 years. And this organization called the Circus Project, which was a circus school for houseless kids, which is pretty cool, found me and I went through their program and it did save my life. And because I had that kind of story, then I was like the poster child, and I was meeting with donors, and there were a lot of donors that were like, tell us about what it's like being homeless so that they can feel good about themselves. And I worked with a auctioneer for a gala who told me that if I cry while I'm delivering the appeal, the ask at the gala, people are 30% more likely to give, and that I should try to cry. And it took me a long time, this was like 12 years ago. It took me a long time to realize how I was being exploited. And, when I wrote this article, Circus Project made a public statement and apologized to me. And I wound up working with them on staff and helping them shift their practices. But yeah, like if we thinking about how we're talking about the people we're serving, if it's just like poverty porn and trying to make donors feel like heroes, that's breaking the trust of the communities that we are interacting with, and the communities who need our support the most, and the ones that should be centered in the work rather than donors being centered. I'm not saying, like devalue donors, but like the CCF principles, community-centric fundraising principles, tell us that we should be treating the community with the same respect that we would treat our donors and funders. And and that respect wasn't offered to me until nearly 10 years later.
And if you hadn't said anything, it would have never come up. So
I don't know if they ever would have realized on their own.
No. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Oh my gosh. What an amazing story. I can't believe the auctioneer. Oh my gosh. I can't believe he said that. He or she.
Yeah.
They said that.
Yeah. I'm going to be as anonymous as possible because they still work in the field.
Right.
But like, and I think change their practices too. This was, 12, this was when I was 18. So this was a long time ago. And I believe that person has also changed their practices. The whole industry has shifted a lot. But yeah, I mean, I had this pressure on me to, perform for people.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible. Well, I would love to move in to the section we like to call our hot seat questions. And these are just some really fun questions that we like to ask. So I usually kick it off with the same question every time. And it is, what is the best or worst piece of unsolicited advice you've received in your entire career?
I've gotten a lot of really great advice. Not really unsolicited. I spent a lot of time meeting with as many people as I could. And I think, two of the best pieces of advice were, in every book I read, which some of the books I read, I'll like list them off right now because I highly recommend them. There's a book, We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers. And it's, she's a Black woman and talks about how if you're a person of color or in the gender minority, generating wealth is a responsibility to our communities. And that book taught me a lot about shifting my money story and being comfortable with like asking for money, asking for what I'm worth, when setting my rates. And holding that responsibility for my community and knowing that I can put it back out into my community, which is why I have a reparations fund. Another book that I absolutely love is Chill and Prosper, which used to be called Chillpreneur. And You Are a Badass at Making Money. And all of those books talked about getting a coach, getting support, taking a class. And so that was like some of the best advice. And then I was meeting with someone who was kind of mentoring me for a while, and she was like, you don't have to wait till your website's up. You don't have to wait till you have a newsletter following. You don't have to wait until you have your business cards. Like, just start doing the work now. And she pointed out, like, you're basically already doing it. Start, calling it whatever you want to call it and charge what you want to charge. But like, your business already exists, even if you haven't set up all of this infrastructure yet. And then in terms of bad advice, I'm very lucky. I have had such supportive people in my network, and I'm really particular about who I have in my life. And I'm sure maybe some like douchey white guys have given me bad advice, but it like just didn't even register because I wasn't listening to them at all. So like, I have no idea what it was. Doesn't matter. So the people, in my life haven't, given me negative advice, but I will say, my very dear friend and I were having drinks. This was when I had just quit my job, my last job, and we were having drinks, and I was asking him, I was like, I'm so torn. I don't know if I should just go find another job that's more stable, or if I should, take this leap and start my business. And I was going back and forth, and he said, you know what, like, I'm just like, given the landscape, in nonprofits, and given where you're at in your career right now, like I recommend just like get another job, be stable for a while. And as soon as he said that, I knew. I was like, okay, actually, I'm not going to do that. I now know exactly what I want to do. Because as soon as he said that, it like sat with me, and I was like, no, that's not what I want. I want to take this leap. And when I told him that, he was like, of course, very supportive. And he was like, yeah, like, hell yeah. Okay. Like, I'm glad I helped you figure that out. So it wasn't like bad advice with like, you know, nefarious intent. But it was the advice that helped me realize what I really wanted to do.
I love that. And I love asking that question because I just feel like the answers we get are so amazing. Like we just get a really wide range of people answering that and discussions that come from it. So that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great that you have such a supportive group around you.
Yeah. And I can't even list like all the pieces of good advice that I got. Like, I have a friend who was like, if people want to like pick your brain, then they probably want to be clients. Just assume that they want to be clients. And if white people want to pick your brain, charge them a fee, which I think is great advice. And yeah, like I met with as many people as I could and sat down and asked them how they started their business. And I just like got this wealth of information, and all of that advice combined has informed every choice that I've made in starting this business.
That's great.
That's really great. Well, I'm going to pivot and talk a little bit about another great article that I had read a while back that you published in CCF, where you shared your past experience as a sex worker and how that set you up. Yeah, how that set you up for making it easier for you to ask money as a fundraiser. And I want to just commend you. I really love the way that you're bringing light to the fact that sex work is work. And those experiences, don't define you as a person. But can you, I think this is like a two-part question. Where do you get kind of this inspiration to write? Because I feel like that is, writer's block is one thing that I always struggle with. And then can you share with our audience as well how you've overcome any stigma associated with having that as your past work experience, and advice for anybody who is super concerned that something that they did in their past is going to create stigma for them to be able to move forward in the work that they want to do?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought this up because it does remind me of another piece of bad advice that I did get where, I'm really open about my history. And I kind of have to be, when I've gotten jobs, they run a background check and they know that I've been incarcerated. But I had someone give me the advice of depersonalize, separate your personal life from the work you're doing, and, maybe stop being so honest about your personal problems, and people just want to stick to the work. And that is the opposite that I've done, the opposite approach that I've taken. And my personal experiences are deeply steeped in all of the work I'm doing. And I've learned that when you just speak from the heart and you share your personal stories, people listen and people are more engaged with what you have to say. And so in terms of writing the articles, oh my gosh, I have pathological demand avoidance so hard, which I just wrote a blog piece about that on my website, nowthisconsulting.com. But it is so hard for me to get a regular writing practice going. So that's why my blog pieces are usually really spaced out or kind of just happen at random times, because sometimes I get hit with an idea and I have to sit down right then and start writing it. Otherwise, it's never gonna go anywhere. And as someone with ADHD, for me, it's I can't think of anything as a first draft. I just have to write it and it's done. Mm-hmm. And that means that, at community-centric fundraising, they have an editor, which is great because I did not go to high school and I don't have great grammar and punctuation. But when I'm doing my own blog, it's it's going to look how it's going to look. It might be messy, but I just need to write it and get it out there before it's gone and before I lose the will to do it. And that last that last article that you're talking about, which is called If I Could Put Sex Worker on My Resume. And it talks about my experience as a sex worker, like you said, and also in the black market drug trade, and how having those conversations, working with those patrons and clients, really got me comfortable talking about money, really got me comfortable making sales. I was a great salesperson. And especially in sex work, I got comfortable being in community with people who were wealthy. And I stopped separating myself, us and them, which I had like a deep separation, especially having been homeless, and standing on a street corner asking for money and having people not even look at you. So moving into sex work and honestly, I was selling weed sales, which now like white dudes make so much money on, and I still have felonies. But moving into those spaces was the first time that I had financial independence, economic independence, and yeah, felt in community with people who, I'm sure they have money, sure they have more means than me, but they're actually not that different. And so how that did position me to be a great fundraiser, and also has informed the work I'm doing in the DEI space. And before I submitted that, I thought it might ruin my career. I was very nervous because, not a lot of people talk about these things. And because of the limitations on people who've been incarcerated, on people with felonies, on people who have pasts like mine, they don't wind up in a position where they can talk about these things. They don't wind up in leadership and nonprofits because of the stigma that we have, and because of the way we like kind of have to shroud our identities and our pasts. So this is my opportunity to give that voice. And I'm not going to shut up about it. So another piece of that article was like, what do we consider transferable skills? What do we consider actual like reasonable? What is the word I'm looking for? Like our requirements, our experience, related experience, is, what could someone who's been incarcerated tell you about your work in, when you're working with people who've been incarcerated, or when you're working with houseless folks? How could a bartender have really great communication skills? How could, someone who's been on food stamps impact the work at an anti-hunger nonprofit? Like, it feels really obvious. We should be hiring people with phones. And so, that like, I wanted to challenge other people in the industry and leaders who are in charge of hiring people to what they think is related experience and transferable skills. Because I learned most of what I know from being on the streets. I certainly did not learn it from, I went to college all 2 years, and did not get the same experience there.
Well, I mean, even after going to, college, like it's, I have 3 very expensive pieces of paper, but the where you really learn the work is being in community with people, working one-on-one with people. Like, if you don't ever learn how to do that and communicate, then it doesn't matter that I have those really expensive pieces of paper. Really, the nuts and bolts of what we know how to do and how we know how to interact comes from that lived experience. And I feel like we need to continue to look at different ways to decide whether or not people, like, I hate the word job qualifications or job requirements, because it puts up a barrier if you're like, you have to have a bachelor's or whatnot. And especially with how expensive school is getting right now, like there's a lot of, I know there's a lot of younger folks that are going directly into entrepreneurship because they're like, hey, I could go into debt and end up, houseless at some point because I can't get a job and I can't pay my bills and I can't do this. And so it's, it's creating more barriers for folks out there when, do you really need a college degree to do certain parts of these jobs? Or would it be better if you learned to how to type, took a typing class and like learned how to pick up the phone? Like, you don't need to have this long standing
degree requirement or a master's degree to do some of the jobs out there. You know, you could be working for 10 or 15 years and that's enough experience to make up for being out of there. I mean, I don't want to throw shade to some of our newbies that are coming right out of college, but there's like a very big uptick on like even how to interact in office spaces that a lot of times students coming out of school don't pick up right away. So there are different learning curves out there.
Well, and part of the work that I do now with nonprofits is like hiring practices. And right now I'm helping a client with a hiring process. And so often like the degree requirement, so requiring a bachelor's degree, is usually just used to sift through resumes. It's used to eliminate resumes so you have less that you have to read. And so you're specifically using this to exclude people and like think about who you're excluding, you know? And so often it doesn't even matter what the degree is in. They just want to know that you have one. Or like a client that I'm working with right now had set like 5 years experience. And I, pressed on that. And I was like, why 5 years? Like, what does 5 years do specifically? And what could other experience look like? And yeah, like we're creating these systems that specifically exclude certain types of people, and then we have a homogenous work culture, and then people are like, well, we need a DEI training because why don't we have any people of color, or why don't we have any fat people or autistic people or on our team, and it's because you have these biases when you're looking at resumes, when you're hiring people, and that creates that. I mean, if I hear the right fit, so often when they say the right fit, they're talking about neurotypical people. They're talking about people who aren't challenging. They're talking about people who are just like, I don't know, fun. Like, I think that, I'm really good at my work. I'm not always fun. And I have a different way of communicating because of my neurodivergence. And now I'm kind of going on a tangent on like hiring practices.
That's actually perfect because it tees up my next question perfectly.
Great.
So just to kind of extend that conversation a bit, you recently posted an Instagram video where when you work with organizations who have a lack of diversity on their teams, one thing that you've heard, and I've heard this too when I've been on leadership teams as well, is, well, there wasn't any BIPOC, queer, trans applicants. So it's not our fault that we aren't diverse because those types of people aren't applying to these jobs. So my question is, like, how would you respond to that question, and how would you get them to understand?
Yeah, well, and my question is like, why aren't they applying? Why do you think that is? Because that sounds like a you problem. Because there is talent of color. There are neurodivergent talents out there, and queer and trans people in the workforce who are doing amazing work. And if they're not applying for your jobs, it's not necessarily even about, they'll be like, oh, I posted on Urban League and I posted it, these other like diverse job boards. And it's like, first of all, like I can look at a staff list, and if I see that it's all white staff, like that tells me something. But also, like, you have to make shifts to become the kind of place where people of color, where fat people, where trans people, where neurodivergent people, where disabled people want to work, where they feel safe working. And so it's not about putting the right thing in the job description. It's not about saying the right word or posting your equity statement or having your non-discrimination statement. It's about becoming the kind of place that's going to attract people beyond cis, white, normative, neurotypical, people who, like, it's not bad to hire a white person. Let me say that. Like, it's not inherently bad to have white people on your team. But if that's what your team looks like across the board, there's something that you're doing that is telling the community you're not a safe place to work. And you can change the words you use all you want. But if you're not like making those fundamental changes, you're not like, because we can see those dog whistles from a mile away. If I go to an interview and maybe they had some great things on the job description, but I go to an interview, I can tell right away where the microaggressions are coming from, or when I'm hearing certain language being used, that it's not a place I want to work. And yeah, like I think the community at large can see that. And also like organizations get reputations. It's a small town. And if you know you have a reputation, if you've had people of color leave because they're unhappy, if you're making changes, you need to make that really clear, and you need to take accountability in the community so that people know like, okay, this is something that's been addressed and is being repaired.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
I think I had a different question, but I think I want to pivot. So, and build on what you had just shared there. How or what would you recommend that organizations do to show that reparative work? Because I feel like what we get from a lot of organizations is very performative, like, we made an equity statement, let's celebrate it, or we did this and let's celebrate it, or if I have to go through another, we reshared all this stuff for Black History Month, we are so great kind of things. We just kind of get tired of that. What are maybe like a couple takeaways that you would recommend to folks to start doing to showcase and highlight that they are making those changes?
Mm-hmm. Well, first I'll say like, either being performative or saying and doing nothing are not your only two options. And this, I think, was really clear during Black History Month. There were some organizations that didn't say anything about Black History Month, didn't even acknowledge it. And when I reached out to them, they're like, well, we didn't want to be performative. And it's like, okay, but you could also just be authentic, and still say something. In terms of like actionable things you can do is, like move beyond the equity statement, and how does the equity statement impact the rest of your organization? Put not only your like programmatic projects through the equity lens, but put your wage policies and your FMLA policies and your vacation time and your reasonable accommodation, and put all of those things through your equity lens and compare them to your equity statement. Something, in terms of specific things that I'd like to see, like moving to a 32-hour work week, is something that, like, having a 40-hour work week disproportionately impacts people of color and women, especially women with children or anyone with children, but especially people who are perceived as women, are highly impacted by that because of the cultural norm to hold so much of the domestic labor. And so, moving to a 32-hour work week is an actual way that you can have a positive impact on people who are most excluded from the benefits of a lot of policies. Another thing is, just remove college requirement. Stop doing background checks unless someone's like directly going to be working with children. Or like driving a bus. Like, cool, if you're a bus driver, maybe like check your driving history. Remove must lift 40 pounds from a job description unless it's a physical labor job. I'm sorry, this is a desk job. You don't have to lift 40 pounds. Someone else can move that filing cabinet. And like say that on your job description. Say, we know that people in our community maybe have a higher likelihood of being incarcerated, and we encourage you to apply if you have that experience. Say that out loud, make sure that people know. And then when you're bringing those people onto your team, create a space that's actually safe for them. So often I see, organizations will be like, we prioritize hiring people with lived experience of hunger, but then they never actually ask those people about their hunger policies and like ask them to help influence. I'm not speaking from personal experience at all. I'm not bitter. It's fine. But, when you're bringing those people on staff, it doesn't help to just like bring someone to a table that's not safe for them to be at, where there's not a place for them to eat. So bring people onto the table, make sure they have a place to eat, and make sure they can enter the conversation, that you're creating space for them to enter the conversation. I think does that answer your question?
That was a fantastic. Thank you so much. I feel like that was a lot of great advice that a lot of organizations need
Especially
to hear, because I do think people they overthink it. Like those are simple, I think, simple steps and actions that they can take if they, um, just sit and think about it for a little bit.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially the entrepreneurs that are going to be looking to hire teams shortly. I think it's really important to start from the right place so that, yeah. No, go
Yeah.
ahead.
And honestly, if you don't have like more than, like, if you think about your hiring pool, decide on a certain percentage of that hiring pool that need to be people of color or people with other oppressed identities before you even start interviews. You might have, like, I always tell people you are going to have to extend your hiring process. Plan on extending your hiring timeline if you're going to be doing it equitably. And yeah, like continue to extend until you have representation in you should not be doing interviews if the only people that you will be interviewing are all of one homogenous identity.
Absolutely. That's incredible. Really great advice. I'm going to ask the last hot seat question, and this is a total pivot, because I want to end on a fun note here. On your About You page on your website, in your bio, it says that you are a fire performer, and I am fascinated by this, and I would love to know more, and I'm sure our audience would too. So if you could tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, I went to circus school. And, the reason I wound up joining that circus school was because I was already doing a lot of street performing. I had my hippie phase. I had my Burning Man vibe phase. And so I got into spinning fire poi, and also fire hula hoop, and used to perform doing that professionally. And I actually just recently started dusting off those skills in the last 2 years, and I have a friend who throws these like huge summer parties and always has performers. And so I've performed at her parties and have, gotten back into the swing of it. And I love it so much. It's thrilling. It's like a little scary. I will say, if you are going to take up fire dancing, wear a hat that covers all your hair, because I have burned my hair.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, like I've always been a performer. I come from a family of performers, and my family are more like they're musical theater people. And I've always been like a little more on the fringe, on the edge of things.
I love that so much. That's so fascinating. Oh my gosh. I don't know that I would ever be brave enough to do that with fire.
It's not that hard. You can definitely learn. And it's, when it's constantly moving, the flame is constantly moving. It's not too dangerous. It's not that hot. It is so loud though. I think that's something that people wouldn't expect when the fire is like moving next to your head. It is so loud. And so a lot of times, like, I'll be performing to a song and I cannot hear the song. I'm just like trusting that I'm going with it. I'm trusting that I'm on the beat, because all I'm hearing is whoosh, the sound of color.
I didn't even think about that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Well, Nel, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We wanted to give you a moment. Is there anything that you want to plug, or anything that we didn't ask you about that you want to make sure that our audience hears today?
Yeah, well, I basically have zero recollection of everything I've said so far. So I'm excited to hear the podcast and see what I remember to talk about. And in terms of, like what I'm up to right now, well, I'm going to be plugging this podcast that was on this episode. I am currently accepting consultations for projects starting in June and beyond. So you can find me at nowthisconsulting.com. And I've got a contact page there, or you can just email me directly at nel@nowthisconsulting.com. I'm excited to help folks with any fundraising projects as well as like organizational change. And I know that folks who are on like a July to June fiscal year will be budgeting then. So don't forget to, even if it's not with me, don't forget to include DEIJ work into your budget, and plan on hiring consultants to help you through that process. In terms of anything else, I don't have any speaking gigs coming up. I'm mostly just like, I've got my head down. I'm working with a bunch of clients. So that's been keeping me nice and busy. And I did want to say, I forgot to kind of come back to this when we were talking about the sex work article. When I was so afraid it was going to ruin my career, and I guess this is like a hopeful story to end on, but I was so afraid it was going to ruin my career. And as soon as I posted it, like the next day, someone reached out to me and said, I'm working on this really cool project. I want to talk to you about it. And I was invited to work with a group called Sex Worker Affirming Advocates. And we are moving forward systems change work to decriminalize sex work in Oregon, which I am very excited about. And I get to participate in helping fund that very important work. So yeah, I'll just leave you with that nugget of like, I took a risk. I did something that was really scary that I thought could have had a really negative impact. But because I spoke from my truth, because I was, personal and honest about who I was, it opened up an opportunity that I wouldn't have had normally.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
And congratulations. This is huge.
Thank you. Yeah, things are going really well, and I'm so I'm very I'm so grateful for the people in my life. I'm grateful for everyone who has given me any advice. I'm grateful for anyone who has given me bad advice. I'm grateful for everyone who's just given me a chance to speak. I'm grateful for you guys of like bringing me on into your space and allowing me to like tell my story. Everyone in my community has impacted the work that I'm doing right now, and I'm trying to do everyone proud.
You're doing
well, I am very proud of you, Nel. Like you are doing great on your own, and thank you again for sharing your story with our listeners. And we look forward to getting updates and staying in touch with you.
Yes.
So
yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Take the Leap podcast. We hope you found useful takeaways you can apply to your entrepreneurial journey. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and keep in touch and follow us on Instagram. If you have business questions, shoot us a direct message or leave us a comment. We'll try to cover it in an upcoming episode. And visit our website, taketheleap-today.com for more resources like our online course that accompanies this podcast.